Hey, hello everybody. Happy Wednesday. Can't believe it's Wednesday. Time is fast. So today we're going to be talking about attractiveness and how that plays out into the workplace. So let me just let folks know I'm live. And hi Brian, welcome in. How are you? How is your day going? Let me get rid of this. Okay, I think this is the one. So let me post that out. Okay, so let's talk about it. Overall, this is kind of what I want to address in this video. There are a couple different articles I'm going to show. There's one video I want to highlight, and I want to address a few things. So the first one is just overall exploring attractiveness. Now I am going to focus more on women just because that's where more of the content is coming from. So just kind of highlighting what are the benefits of being more attractive in the workplace, and then what are the disadvantages too, because there are benefits and disadvantages that I'm finding. And then how do we fix I guess some of the bias that happens? What are some things that we can do when it comes to the workplace? And then also, what are companies doing? And then what are the effects? Like, can we really take out the attractiveness piece when we're assessing people and things like that for every industry? So we'll talk about that. And then I'm going to get into colorism and what that means as far as attractiveness, where things kind of came from. Why do we have some of the colorism issues? And then what's kind of the treatment in the workplace based on skin tone? Then there's differences of opinion. So there's some people that are lighter skin tone and they will share some things that they've experienced. And then there's also darker skinned people that are sharing their thoughts and opinions and things that they witnessed in the workplace as well. So there was a pretty in-depth study about that. And then what's the other thing? We'll kind of round things out by showing a little bit of the data or a lot of the findings in some of these instances where people of varied skin tones are talking about their experiences. So I will go ahead and start off, I think, with the video just to kind of round us out. Let's see. Let me just take a look at something real quick. Okay. All right. So, hey, Kelly's Crochet, welcome in. Nice to see you. Ready for the video? Okay, cool. So with the video, you know, I always like to just test things out because I'm not always the best when it comes to the technology. So just let me know if you're able to see the video. We'll start there and then we'll start talking about this. And it is a YouTube video, and a heads up, the video is from 2015. So it's a little dated, but honestly, it was like the only one I could find on kind of short notice because I was like, oh, I want to show a video versus kind of showing this long 15-page article or study in these different articles. So keep that in mind. So let me go see if I can pull this up. Okay, so I selected audio, so I'm going to go ahead and hit play. Just note there's an ad that's going to play first, but I'm going to skip that.
Want to enter a healthcare field in demand? Become an occupational therapy assistant through St. Kate's Pioneer online OTA program. There's no wait to start.
It's often said that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and it's true. We all have different opinions about what's beautiful. But it's proven time and time again that people who are tall, physically fit, and facially symmetrical are oftentimes more successful than others in the workplace. In 2010, Newsweek surveyed more than 1,000 people, some of whom were hiring managers, and discovered 72% believed being considered attractive was an advantage for a woman who's interviewing for a job.
I think that a manager at work wants to know that you care enough about your appearance to be able to project professionalism on the job.
And after the interviewee gets the job,
who is that sad little person? Are we doing a before and after piece I don't know about?
60% of the hiring managers Newsweek polled thought women who wore figure-flattering clothing at work might have an advantage. And in another study, so-called
So I'm pausing right there because it's interesting that they were talking about the figure, right? So a lot of times when you think of the attractiveness, you think about, the face, right? Wearing makeup and things like that, fixing your hair, just, the aesthetic that way. But they're highlighting the physique and actually wearing a type of clothing that shows off your physique. So that makes me think of, what about, folks that are not the standard of beauty there, where maybe they're a little bigger, they're more curvaceous, right? How does that pair for them? And I do wonder, they pulled a lot of different studies for this video. I wonder the thinking why. I can imagine, I can assume, right? Because you're thin, it kind of goes along with that attractiveness picture of what people can see in the office. And hello, so Kelly, Brian, Natural Larissa. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name again. I'm so sorry if I butchered it. And then Paolindo, welcome in. Okay, so I'll get back into the video now. And yeah, Kelly, that is wild, right?
attractive people were found to make as much as 11 to 15% more than their less attractive coworkers. But it might be that we can't help ourselves when responding favorably to people we think are attractive. Dr. Gordon Patzer, who studies attractiveness, told CNN, controlled studies show people go out of their way to help attractive people of the same and opposite sex because they want to be liked and accepted by good-looking people. It's actually related to a type of cognitive bias called the halo effect, a term first used in 1920. A variation of the halo effect says people will often think attractive individuals are smarter, funnier, kinder, and even more athletic than average-looking people.
So did anyone know that already? So, I wonder too in the chat, like, have you had that experience? Because I know I have, where you can go out one day and you just run out, you don't put anything in your face, your hair is like in a ponytail, and you just run out the door and not really thinking so much about, okay, what do I look like? Because I'm just going to Target or somewhere, right? But then there's other times where you look nicer, you put some makeup on your face, maybe you just got your hair done. I did not just get my hair done. I actually need to get my hair done. Need a silk press soon. But, you do these things and maybe you dress up a little nicer and you find that people are kinder to you. Maybe you get some free stuff. Maybe people are opening doors for you more. Maybe people are just coming up to you and saying, would you like to try a sample of this perfume or whatever? All these little things that happen. Maybe you get stopped because you were speeding and the officer lets you off, maybe because you look a certain way. That's kind of generally a stereotype, right? Or thought that happens. All these little things that might, play into your mind, all because you took maybe 10 to 15 minutes to look a little better. So I'm interested to see, especially for the ladies in the chat, if that has happened to you. For the men, they did point out people that are tall, and we talked about this on this channel, the height factor of how men that are actually taller, naturally there's nothing you can do about that, at least today, about your height, they tend to get to leadership levels. So that can be, deemed as an attractiveness factor too.
Still, good looks can sometimes be a detriment for women.
I'm sorry, are you here to see me?
I go here.
You got into Harvard Law?
What, like it's hard?
Crudely referred to as the bimbo effect. Good-looking women might find they have to work hard to prove their competence, especially when working in male-dominated settings. While it's been acknowledged these beauty biases exist in our culture, not a whole lot is being done to fight them. Only a few U.S. cities have protections against discrimination due to personal or physical appearance, including Washington, D.C. and Madison, Wisconsin. In 2011, an economics professor wrote in a New York Times article, it might not be difficult to come up with classes of attractiveness to make an anti-discrimination law, but getting people to classify themselves as not attractive might be difficult. Ugliness is not a personal trait that many people choose to embrace. Those whom we classify as protected might not be willing to admit that they're ugly. Similar to contestants auditioning on NBC's The Voice, some companies are implementing blind interviews in their hiring process so applicants can be judged solely on job skills. Despite attempts to fix workplace biases, overcoming perceptions of beauty as a whole might require people recognizing they do judge others based on looks. A writer for the Boston Globe summed.
So I'm going to pause right there because we talked about on this channel unconscious bias. So we definitely have conscious bias. So I know that I am maybe judging someone because of the type of shirt they're wearing. Maybe they're wearing a wrinkled up shirt and old shoes or something, and there's some bias there that I can recognize. But I think a lot of the things happen because people aren't even realizing they're doing it. They're saying, oh, I don't have any biases, or I wouldn't think that. I don't consider looks when I'm considering someone getting a promotion, all these things. But it's unconscious, so you don't necessarily know it. There are some things like the implicit bias assessment through Harvard. I think they still have that assessment where you can go and see if you have any biases based on color and skin tone, all these different things. And you can recognize it from that. But a lot of times you're not even recognizing that you have these unconscious biases.
It up perfectly. We do ourselves a disservice by saying looks don't matter in society. That's counterproductive. We need to say looks do matter. For Newsy, I'm Catherine Beek.
Okay, I didn't realize it was that close to ending. So yeah, I definitely think it's true. I think to that ending, when you say looks don't matter, like, come on, looks do matter. Just like when people are saying like, oh, I don't see color. It's like, well, you do, and you should see my beautiful color over here. Just like when a person, if you've ever been in the office and someone gets a tan, they kind of want everyone to see their tan. Now that's more, white people. I wouldn't say there's as many Black people that do that. Some Black people do. They want their tan and they want that glowy effect. I've had some friends that are like, yeah, I need to get a tan, and they're darker skin. I remember Kelly Rowland says that she said in like some article I wrote a long time ago that she tans. So, but generally for white persons in the office, I've seen them say, look at my tan. And so that's another form of beauty that I did pull up an article about, we can talk about. But that's another metric, like the comparison of pale skin to tan skin. And then I do want to pull up this comment from King of Kill. Could it possibly be because when people feel more attractive, they're more confident and assertive, and people tend to follow those type of people? Yes, I think it's a mixture of a lot of things. I will tell people when they're going to an interview, right? And even their first couple of weeks on the job, to make sure they look really nice, because not only are other people either consciously or unconsciously assessing people by how they look, and other things too, like, how you talk and so many things, right? But how you look before you even said anything. You haven't even said anything, right? You're judging someone by how they look. So I think with that, the reason I also tell people this is because you tend to be more confident the more comfortable you are, and when you're feeling really good. Like there's that old saying, right, that says when you look good, you feel good. So I always want the person to not only have the leg up with the other person that is going to be looking at them, but, I want them to feel their best. And oftentimes that is when you're dressed really nicely, when you've, groomed yourself really well, for men and women, right? I've definitely seen men and how different men will walk into a room when they're wearing like a suit, or they're, you ever see a guy with like a fresh shave or a lining or any of these things, and they just they walk different because they are most likely more confident. right? Because they look good and they feel better and more confident about themselves. So I definitely think that could be a big thing at play here. So I wanted to bring that just to kind of set the tone, highlight. Oh my gosh, have I been talking this whole time and been on mute? Were you guys able to hear me just now? So basically what I was saying is that it definitely could be a mix of both. It could be a mix of when you look good, you feel good. So that's why I tell people too, when they're going to interview, when they're having those first 3 weeks on the job, not only are people assessing them, but they also will need to feel their most confident and comfortable self. And a lot of times that means, you're dressing the right way. So you're dressing in a way where you're confident and you're comfortable. So obviously, if you don't like wearing suits and you're not comfortable wearing suits, you wouldn't wear a suit necessarily, or suit and tie. But if there's a certain outfit that's really put together, professional, right, and you feel your best in, it fits you nice and everything else, yeah, you're going to be more confident. And what I was saying before, okay, natural, you were able to hear me. Okay, perfect. I was like, okay, let me restate what I was just saying. So you see this in men and women. Like if a man walks into a room, you kind of notice the confidence versus a man that's kind of just got on some jeans and whatever. But it's interesting when you look at CEOs, often they will, like we know Steve Jobs, he always wore the same thing. Every time we saw him presenting something, it was like that black top and some pants. So, but it was still presentable, and maybe that's what he felt most confident in and probably saved him a lot of time. So he's like, I know I like this, and that's what I'm going to wear every day. So who knows? But yeah, so I just wanted to bring that video to lay things out. So I want to share something else, is the advantages. So there was an article that Harvard Business Review did. So let me pull this up. Oh, let me see if that can go away. Don't want that. Okay. So let me share this. Okay, here we go. Okay, let me know if you can see the article. Hopefully you can. Hopefully it shows nicely. Here, let me just make it just slightly bigger. So this article by Harvard Business Review are basically talking about why is it that attractive people get unfair advantages? So I'm going to look at this, and I'm also going to bring up some ways that beauty bias doesn't always work. So they went into this and called it lookism. So they talked about, there's so many things, sexism, racism, ageism, all these things that, cause biases. But they call, when you're looking at physically attractive people and seeing that there's some bias there when it comes to those getting interviewed for jobs and hired, those that are being able to advance more quickly through their careers, getting more promotions, getting higher wages, all of that, they're calling it lookism. So I thought that was interesting. I had never heard that term before, but it's called lookism. Now, they're also saying the appearance-based discrimination, it can include the weight. So they're saying obese. If you're dressed in a way that's not, maybe fashionable. Like I love the video. They pulled that snippet from The Devil Wears Prada, where if anyone's seen that movie, this girl is really judged because she's not fashionable. And then once this guy kind of helps her get to looking a lot better, very fashionable, almost model-like. Anne Hathaway is is the actress that plays this character. She gets treated better, and she pretty much replaces the other girl who was working for this, the dragon lady, or the head of this, I guess, beauty fashion magazine. So they also included tattooed candidates. Now, I don't feel like tattoos are as taboo anymore, but I do think people still, when they're going on an interview, they tend to hide their tattoos because they don't want that bias. And then kind of the trend is you hide the tattoo, and then once you're working there, you take, you don't put the makeup over it, or you don't wear the long sleeve shirt, or wherever your tattoo is, if it's visible. You just kind of go with it, and you're hired. People are pretty open to that. A lot of people have tattoos. I don't think it's a big deal, but they did include that as some bias. And I think, maybe if you're talking with someone that's maybe of a older generation, like if a baby boomer is, maybe interviewing you, they may think about that. They may not realize, but there may be some unconscious bias there. So I thought that was interesting, just some of the things that they looked at with the assessment. Now, something else is that it kind of depends on the industry. They were saying that, and I think it was this article and another article, where they looked at certain industries like sales, and they really didn't think there would be any way around the assessment. Like if you don't assess people on attractiveness, it could hurt the business. If the main part of a person's job is to meet with clients and customers and sell product, because we know that this bias can help those in those sales industries. Versus on the downside, there was an article, and I don't think it's this one, I think it's the next one, but Fast Company, they put out an article that basically said attractive people don't always get ahead at work. And so let me pull that one up. Let me just make sure there was nothing else I wanted to hit on in here. I thought there was something. Oh, okay. Wait a minute. Here, this one. I highlighted, so that's the good part. So in this study, they mention how AI, or artificial intelligence, and of course, blind interviews can help us with these biases. So they're saying clearly there's an unfair advantage to being deemed more attractive and unfair handicap to being deemed less attractive. So they're talking about, either using AI or science-based assessment, past performance, resume data, like kind of eliminating or taking out some of the human biases that can happen. But I think for every industry that would be tough, because I think there's always going to be this desire to see how professional people look, how professional people communicate, and things like that. So I think that would be the only piece that I want to consider. Let me look at some comments here. King of Kill said, I'm a whole other person with a tailored suit on. See? Okay, there we go. You're a whole nother person with a tailored suit on. And thank you, Larisha. I'm sorry I pronounced your name wrong. Hopefully, did I pronounce it right that time? Brian is saying, yeah, it's interesting. So this other article basically talks about, let me see if I can bring this up really quick. So Fast Company basically was saying, with certain industries, attractiveness can actually hurt you. So they looked at this idea that beauty can create distance from other people. And they looked at the service industry, and they saw that for people in the service industry, so think waitresses, think flight attendants, think, these jobs where you're servicing people, well, there could be some disadvantages because people relate more, is what they found. People relate more to people that are not deemed as attractive. There's like some distance that comes from being so attractive, which can stem from maybe how this person feels about themselves, and kind of some biases that happen with, maybe someone being just so perfect, and you kind of lose some of that human nature. There have been studies that show, like, if someone makes a mistake, I actually saw one of these demonstrations where this girl, they had the girl being perfect, this perfect performance in like a Sam's or something, and they, how they sell things. And the sales actually increased when she made a mistake, like she dropped something, and people related to her more, is what they thought was the reason. And that's why the sales increase versus her being so perfect. So what they're finding is that for those like service industries, it may actually hurt you to be more attractive. So it's not necessarily with every single industry. All right, so let me pull something else up here and get rid of that. That's not a lot. That's not a lot. Let me see here. Because I have to pull up my notes for this next one because they went in. So basically, how do you fix this issue? What do you do to kind of get beyond it? Using artificial intelligence and screening, using blind interviews and resume reviews, I think can help. But Glassdoor actually reported there are many industries and businesses that would suffer if they were to like legislate out a beauty bias, because there are some places, like they mentioned, DC, Wisconsin, or Madison, Wisconsin, where they have anti-discrimination based on looks. So this lookism idea, they actually have some things in place that hopefully can get rid of some of that bias. And so really for me, what I take away and what I will continue to tell folks if they are working in different industries, as they go out and about during their day, as they go on job interviews and things like that, is to always just look your best. You know what makes you feel the most confident, what makes you feel the most attractive, and makes you feel the most comfortable. So make sure that you're using that to your advantage. And, you know, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like, there are so many things that you can do to make yourself feel more attractive. I mean, no matter what you look like, there's certain colors that people gravitate to more. Like, I love the color red or pink on me, and I like my hair like this, or I feel more confident when my nails are done, or all these different things. Or with men, I like it when I have a clean shave, or, you know, all these different things that you can consider before you're either going in to interview someone, meeting with a client, meeting with a potential person that's going to go into a business deal with you, whatever it might be. Keep those things in mind, that yes, the attractiveness factor does go into effect, but then also realize that for women, some of the disadvantages specifically for women is this bimbo effect. Like, you have to work harder to prove that you're competent, especially in those, you know, man-dominated spaces. We've heard this a lot. And then also with service jobs, it may hurt you because you're not as relatable. So let's get into the lighter skin versus darker skin. And so I want to pull this up. Let me take this away. Okay, let me get rid of some of this because I have so many screens up right now. So that'll make my life a little bit easier. Okay, I want to get this article. Did I save it? That is the question. Did I save the article? Oh, okay. So one other thing I did want to point out, because I thought this was interesting. I mentioned it just a few minutes ago, but I did want to highlight this. Because I've talked about it a little bit, this idea about like pale versus like tanned people. Because again, I told you guys the story, if you remember, about this girl in college, and she had, you know, she was very beautiful. She had pale skin naturally. And a lot of other, and I would say girls, I don't know if guys really talked about it, but I do think they tan too. But a lot of the white girls would say like they need a tan. They got a tan. So I got it. I was like, okay, so they like tan skin. But this girl, she went completely against the mold, pale skin. She would wear a red lip, and she also had red hair. And so it was completely different. Thought it was beautiful. But this article kind of confirmed some thoughts I had just based on what I've heard, just kind of thinking about my life from other people, is this whole idea that people think that tan individuals are more attractive, healthier looking, and it's incredibly difficult to get someone not to, I don't want to read all of that. But basically, people think that tan individuals are more attractive and healthier looking. So that was the main point there. Something else was in here. About 28 million Americans still frequent tanning booths each year. And then there's something else. This part. Okay. people are using Photoshop. Like we've seen the like blackfishing even, where people go way deep on the tan, where they look like they're a mixed race person and sometimes even a black person. We've seen a lot of those happenings because this idea that tan is that standard of beauty now. So they said using Photoshop, 45 photos of women aged 21 to 35 were doctored to look tan. The original photos and the doctor versions were posted to the site at different times. Researchers found that the darker version was twice as likely to be rated as more attractive. The other thing is they took this piece from someone that said, when I look in the mirror, I feel more attractive when I'm darker. Like my face is prettier. It's 100% a confidence boost for me. So it's interesting how when we look at white people, and I assume this is more so in America, but this thought that it makes them look more attractive with a tan versus the pale skin. The title of the article, this was from ABC News, a healthy tan, darker skin rated more attractive. Interesting. So that leads us to kind of looking at light skin and dark skin with African Americans, because there was a lot of feedback on both sides. So there were lighter skinned people that said, they've had their issues, and then darker skinned folks that said they had their own issues in the workplace. Hey, Percy, welcome in. What outfit makes me most confident? Business, casual, or dressed down? For me, I think it depends on the setting. So for me, if I am going to an interview, if I'm going to an office, I tend to wear like a dress, like a professional dress or suit dress kind of deal. So dress in a blazer. That makes me feel pretty confident. I personally like dresses a lot. So I wear, like during the summer, you will normally see me like in a sundress. So that is what I feel, the most beautiful, the most confident in. If I'm going out on a date, I tend to wear a dress and heels. Like that's a different scenario. So I'll wear, obviously not a work suit dress, but a more casual type of dress, or, give me off a more grown-up vibe. And then of course heels, and, just kind of casually out and about. I would say I feel pretty confident, again, in a dress. Sometimes I'll just go with a pair of skinny jeans and a nice top. Or I don't really wear skirts too much. I normally just keep it. I like dresses because it's a one piece. Like you just pick a dress. It's funny because in my office, at one place of work that I was in, everyone in my group that I worked with would say like I'm so dressed up. Like they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, you're so dressed up," because a lot of them wore jeans to the office every day. And I would always tell them like, no, like this. I feel very comfortable in this dress, and it took me 2 seconds to do. I go into my closet, I pick a color, I pick a dress, and it's just one piece. Versus for if you're wearing pants and a top, you have to, do these pants look right on me? Does this match this top? Does this top match this? So it's just like one thing, right? So that's my thinking about it. Let me see. Brian was laughing, and Kelly was saying, wow, can't kill you at the gym. Okay, enjoy. Oh, you're still, okay, so you'll join after. Cool. All right. I don't plan on being on here that long. I'm hoping I can get this in like an hour. Like it's been 34 minutes, so I better get going. Okay, so I want to pull up this study because there's a lot here. This study that was done by SIU. So it's like a lot of pages in here. So I'm going to try to trim it down. I pulled out a lot, but basically they actually got participants, so African Americans that were different skin tones, and they wanted to understand what their experiences were in the workplace. So did they feel like they had privileges? Did they feel like others had privileges over them? And then they also wanted to identify diversity training and what effect that might have. So there are two things that they wanted to find out. was how does skin tone bias impact African Americans in the workplace? And then the other thing they wanted to figure out was what are the implications of including skin tone bias among African Americans in diversity training. So in that workplace. And then they also, I just kind of noted for myself, they did find out how people were treated. So they did this test. They had data collected. Now, this study is a way back. So it was 2004, just put this out there. And they did use studies like throughout for different years as well. So they combined a lot of different studies as well. So that's why there's multiple pages. Oh, let me share my screen. I'm not sharing my screen yet. Hold on. 1 minute. And I see your note, Kelly, you normally wear dresses. Yes, I feel the same way. They're so easy. I usually wear dresses in the summer. Thank you. And they're flowy and they're cool. So like in a state in the South, it's you're cool, you're trying to cool down. Like that's the best approach for me. So I love that. Okay, let me see here. Oh, did I take it away? Okay, here we go. So I think it's this one. Let me know if you can't see my screen. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so I'm gonna be kind of toggling from what I'm showing here. Okay, so the impact of African American skin tone bias in the workplace. So this is what they studied. Now, they're also going to highlight some different things that companies can do. Okay, let me see if I can get to the page that I want to highlight. Okay, let me go back. I thought there was something else. Hold on 1 second, because I thought there was one other thing that I wanted to show you guys. What was it? I think it might be in here somewhere. So let me see if I can find it. Because what they did, I looked at something that basically said, like, how did we get to this place where we are in this system where we have all these different colorism issues? So I wanted to highlight that first. Is this it? Okay, let me go back to my notes. Okay, yeah, it was this article. I wish I had put the page number for myself to help me out a little bit. Okay. Was it page 4? Here we go. Okay, I think it was in here. So this is where it all stems from. So I want someone that if you're not coming from the Black culture or Black American culture to really understand, like, what is the big deal? So this is kind of how they started things out. So scholars have suggested for years that skin tone bias in the African American community, the privilege of lightness, has served to promote power inequities or power inequalities and to perpetuate stereotypes initiated by white slave owners. Two prominent historical viewpoints were that dark-skinned African American slaves were considered by whites to be less attractive, lazy, unintelligent, while light-skinned African Americans were seen as more attractive, intelligent, and capable, mainly due to their biological connection to their white slave owner. Light-skinned slaves enjoyed the privileges of their slave owners' fathers, usually without merit. So typically, obviously it was the father, because we know that things like R-ing, I'm not going to say the word per YouTube, but we know that those things happen in history. That's why we have all this mixture, because of that breeding that was happening between these men. They were R-ing the women. So lighter skinned slaves were, I'm going to put in typically, allowed to work in the home of the slave owner, while darker skinned slaves were forced to do laborious duties in the cotton fields. Opportunities were available to the lighter skinned slaves, such as the ability to become educated and freed from slavery. These privileges allowed light-skinned African Americans to gain entry into predominantly white organizations, including institutions of higher education and workplaces, because their light skin tone signified white ancestry and made them less threatening to whites. And there are some references that I will show at the end, or if you want to kind of follow along, they are at the end of this article. I want to say I included the article. I think I did. So a rift among dark-skinned and light-skinned slaves resulted. I just want to kind of highlight this because I want people to understand where it comes from. So we are continuing to have these poor relationships is basically what they're highlighting in the rest of this. So skin tone bias may be oppressive is what they're saying. They've also stated the maintenance of these demeaning stereotypes, again, stemmed from slavery. Negative attitudes, about African Americans, it keeps us in separate groups based on skin tone and also class. So skin tone bias can be oppressive and can support theories of superiority similar to that of white privilege. I don't want that to be missed. So there can be a superiority complex happening based on skin tone. So just like some people don't believe racism exists, right? Some people don't believe colorism exists. But they're saying that it's basically an offset of the racism. So it's just like basically just another form of it. But now we're looking at light skin being closely tied to whiteness and how that is kind of creating this superiority thinking in the community. So they go on to say light skin in the African American community grants certain unearned privilege that is despised by darker skinned African Americans. So just like there are many African Americans in the country that despise, the privilege that many white Americans get, you take that and put that into our community. So there are privileges that they're saying that light-skinned people, so unearned privilege, so based on your skin tone. This is true for many other racial groups that have variation in skin tone. Fair skin is valued. And we talked about that on this channel specifically. We looked at places like India where there's heavy skin bleaching. You look at Bollywood. I think it's getting better, but there's still this thing where you see more of the lighter skin Indian women and men on screen. But when you look at videos, for example, I have not been to India. So I've looked at videos where they show people in India and I'm like, so they're actually of a dark skin tone, like similar to mine. So it's interesting that you don't really see that on screen. And there's the heavy push for skin bleaching and things of that nature. So they go on to say, just as being white carries considerable advantage and maintains itself in the privileged seat of rationality and superiority, lightness may constitute power in the African American community that has been used directly or indirectly to oppress others. This type of oppression can negatively impact societies and organizations as a whole, not just dark-skinned American or African Americans. Greater effort should be made to encourage all Americans to become attuned to their own color bigotry and challenge the insidious belief that whiteness is a marker of beauty, merit, and intelligence. So this is the part where I want to highlight, because this thinking that, lighter skin is more attractive for whatever the reasons noted there, right? So let me take a pause. Let me see what folks are saying in the chat before we kind of move on here. Percy's saying, I love a woman in a sundress. Sundresses are nice. They're fun. So, okay. So let's keep going. Now, I'm not going to talk about everything in the midst of this here. So I'm going to kind of skip some of this and move into the main point. So this is the study. Hopefully you guys can see what I'm showing. I don't know if you can really read that, but I'll just kind of talk through it. So they took these different participants and called them participant M or participant H or participant D, and they had male and female participants of different skin tones. So you'll see that they self-describe themselves, and then they also had descriptions by the other person looking at them. So yellow, light caramel, brown, brown skin, brown, light brown, dark skin, black, dark skin, medium hue, dark brown color, chocolate, black, all these different words, right? We have so many words to describe our skin tone. That's great. But they went and they took, a lot of different people. So they did go in and talk about the number of people in the participant list, but that is kind of the highlight there. So they just actually asked them. They actually talked to these folks. So they had the data collected. They did have the data collected, but then they also had these participants. Some of them were chosen from like referrals. Others, I think, people responded to like an ad from the researcher, and then they got them into the study that way. So it's a mix. And so there were ranges. So there were ranges in ages, 35 to 45. Some were under 35. I think one person was over 45. And then 7 of the participants had salary or income ranges from $40,000 to $70,000. Others, there were 3 that had salaries above that range. So different income levels. And then also they did include different places of employment. So some were in city government, some were private universities, some were hospital, technology, companies, nonprofit, a community college, computer consulting firm, like everything. So they had a good mix in there. So they were all interviewed face-to-face in a location where they felt they were most comfortable. And that could have been like their home or also their workspace. So they also had the interviews that were audio taped, and they lasted between 45 minutes to about an hour and a half. So what were the findings of these in-depth conversations? Well, so if we go into, let me see if I can actually make this a little bit bigger, because I don't know if you guys can see too much of it. Okay, maybe that'll be a little bit bigger here. So there's a lot in here. There's a lot. So I'm just going to let me kind of take this away for a second and just go through, because I pulled out everything and then I'll kind of bring it back up so you can see for yourself. So under unequal treatment, it's a lot. Maybe I should pull it up. Do you want to kind of read with me, or do you feel like that's going to be overwhelming? Let me see here. I don't think colorism will ever go away. And yes, it is real, but I do believe society has made progress in that area. I agree. It will always be an issue, right? I agree. I think racism will always be an issue in this country. So I can definitely say that, colorism is of the same end of that. So I'll kind of go through and talk about what the findings were. So one of the participants, participant A, maybe I should just pull up. Yeah, I'll do this. I'll go ahead and share it. Okay, so one participant said, if you're being interviewed for a position in-house, you will have basically the same race going for the same position. But most of the time, the person of a lighter shade would get the promotion. So that's coming from one participant. One participant said that lighter skinned African Americans have an advantage. They believe that light-skinned African Americans get the benefit of the doubt and are often seen as more capable and more professional. So that was one person's take. I'm going to highlight that for myself so I remember next time. Another participant, participant M, described an incident when a lighter skinned employee was retained at the expense of a darker skinned employee. The darker skinned employee was viewed as less professional by the manager, and the lighter skinned employee more confident. So the darker skinned employee was laid off. Participant M described the other inferior or the other light skinned employee gave him a better image for his area, so he kept her. That's interesting. The other light skinned employee gave him a better image for his area, so he kept her. That's really tough to hear. That's tough to hear. So participants of all shades described the form of inferior treatment that they had witnessed darker skinned African Americans experience. So all of the shades, we talked about black, chocolate, light, yellow, everything in between, said that participants of all shades described the forms of inferior treatment that they had witnessed darker skinned African Americans experience. Participant B said a fellow Black employee was being condescending and belittling to another dark-skinned employee, and there was no apparent reason for this treatment. She believed it was due to his dark skin. Participant D said there's a tendency to give them, light-skinned people, a chance, a tendency to be more concerned or let them try. Whereas with the darker-skinned people, there's a tendency, if they don't so-called cut it, that's where the buck stops. So that's what a lot of folks were saying when it comes to the darker skin tone. So what about lighter skinned African Americans? What did they say? So lighter skinned African Americans reported maltreatment from darker skinned African Americans. They reported hearing demeaning statements, being called or hearing derogatory names, and being asked inappropriate questions about their heritage and skin color. You know what? That's interesting because I've definitely heard in the community. I can't say I've heard people outside of the Black community ask these questions as much, but maybe they do. But I've definitely heard, especially Black men, say, "What are you mixed with?" I've even been asked that question, which is crazy. I'm like, what does it look like I'm mixed with? Like, what does it look like I'm mixed with to you? So it's interesting, but I've definitely heard that more to like, if you're lighter skin tone, you could have two Black parents, you could not look, ambiguous or anything. But the question is, what are you mixed with? Which I think, as I think about that, that can be very, can come off very rude, to be honest. Like, why do you have to ask that question to people? And people want to share, great. But and I think today a lot of people want to share. They will tell you, I'm mixed with this, because there are certain people in the Black community that want to be away from Blackness. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. So that's interesting. So that was one participant. Participant G said she heard references, so this is a woman, she heard references such as light, bright, and damn near white. She thinks she's cute and with her high yellow self. So kind of demeaning, automatically thinking that there is some type of superiority there, which we talked about a little bit earlier, that there is that thinking that for lighter skin, just like with white Americans, there's kind of that automatic thinking that you, as a white American or as a lighter skin African American, think that you're a superior, right? So that's interesting. Then they talk about, you hear an online, wait, hold on. Another person said, you hear an online journal of workforce education and development. What? Oh, okay. So you wouldn't understand. So this is someone else that said that she's heard, like when talking about Black issues, that they've been told you wouldn't understand. So they said they hear that comment a lot, that I wouldn't understand a Black issue. Participant B also explained, when you grow up light with a white mother and a Black father, you are going to have to explain some things. So it's always a topic. The light-skinned participant disagreed with the darker-skinned participants regarding the treatment of light-skinned employees. Only the lighter-skinned participants were able to describe maltreatment that they had experienced or accounts that included negative treatment of other light-skinned participants. Or other light-skinned African Americans. For example, when asked if they received, if she perceived that there is discrimination against light-skinned African Americans in the workplace, participant W, a self-identified dark-skinned person, said it would only be racial from white to black. So only coming from maybe a white person if they did experience something. Another participant said, because I'm darker skinned, I experience more blatant discrimination and racism. And the lighter skinned people really don't feel it. So those are some of the things that actually came out of the conversations. So I would encourage you to review the article if you have an interest in that. I think as a whole, some things that can be done are doing actual trainings in the workplace that can highlight these issues. The other thing I would say is it was interesting to see that Applebee's, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, so Applebee's and some other companies have begun to offer training in this area of privilege as a result of growing interracial or intraracial discrimination charges. So Applebee's actually added a protection along with cultural sensitivity training against skin tone discrimination to its anti-discrimination policies. So they're protecting African Americans from other African Americans. So they're protecting Black people from other Black people. So the amount of training that exists on the diversity issue, however, is pretty minimal when it comes to like discrimination that happens between other Black people. So it's interesting. So that's what I wanted to highlight in the study with thinking about like this whole attractiveness factor, how it plays into colorism, and then how does this colorism thing factor into work life. So those are some of the stories from the real life people that came from this study. Let me kind of toggle over here. So I don't know what thoughts are on that. That's kind of what I wanted to bring here with this conversation. It's still an issue. I think a lot of what we can do to kind of combat like the colorism and the attractiveness is just bringing, one, I would say for people, just always making sure you're your most attractive self, right? And then the other part is, along with Applebee's, actually making it so that they actually are doing things where they have discrimination based on skin tone in their policies. Like that they're seeing that as a form of discrimination, that there's bias happening there. And they're actually saying, we're going to put this into our policy. So hearing all of these different scenarios of these people from both ends, so seeing, lighter skinned Americans and darker skinned Americans both seeing, differences in their own way is interesting. And it's also interesting. One participant said that intraracial discrimination is discouraging because there's a lot of talent that's not utilized because the managers have these biases. So that is also interesting. So there's plenty. They said more and more and more and more. All the folks had something to say about it. I think the one that stood out to me, though, was the person that said, participant T, that said, because I'm darker skinned, I experience more blatant discrimination and racism. And the lighter skinned people really don't feel it. So I do wonder if, maybe it's just not felt as much by certain groups of people because maybe they're not expecting it, or maybe it's felt more because as a darker skinned person, maybe you expect to be discriminated against. And so maybe you're looking for it. I don't know. That's also something to consider. So I am going to close this out, but that's kind of what I wanted to highlight for this video. Just exploring this attractiveness, how it plays out in real life. What are some advantages? What are some disadvantages of being quote unquote more attractive? It seems like the benefits are you're definitely deemed to be more professional. 60% of hiring managers said women have an advantage when they're wearing figure-forming clothes. which is interesting because it gets into, weight. And then also that this idea of the halo effect where people really go out of their way to help attractive people and they want them to like them. So if you want people to like you, or you want maybe to go out of your way to help attractive people, where does that play into hiring and things like promotions and all of that stuff? And then the disadvantages that we talked about was the bimbo effect, having to work harder to prove competence, and the fact that there are anti-discrimination now happening based on look, or this lookism. So we saw that with DC and Madison, Wisconsin, they do have policies against that. And also we discovered that service jobs and other industries may actually, you may actually hurt from being more attractive because, beauty can create distance from maybe your potential customer. So there could be some disadvantages there. We talked about how AI can actually fix it because you're taking out, your programming based on certain skill sets to screen people. So you're taking out potential biases as much as you can there. And then also things like blind interviews, blind resumes, or resume reviews. And then from there, thinking about colorism, lighter skin and darker skin. It sounds like, obviously it's happening. It is impacting Black people in the workplace. And there are definitely some implications that are happening on both ends, lighter skin Americans, Black, darker skin Americans as well. Just hearing from all of the different participants in the study. And then how do we kind of go beyond that is just implementing more training, which I really don't see a lot happening there. I think we do see training when it comes to just unconscious bias generally, and, race and ethnicity and, LGBTQ and all these things that come up that people could potentially have biases on. But I haven't seen much on skin tone. So I'm going to throw this into the video for anyone that comes after to see. It's this Harvard implicit bias test. I've done this a few times, but this can actually assess whether you have biases. So I'm going to throw this into the chat. So that study, I think, can, help if you're kind of wondering if you do have some biases based on skin tone. They actually do have it broken out that way. And to Percy's comment earlier, I don't think colorism will ever go away. And yes, it is real, but I do believe society has made progress in that area, but it will always be an issue. I think that's 100% true. I think it is an issue. I do think it will continue to be an issue, but maybe not so much. So anything we can do to make it better, let's do that. So anyway, that is the video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.